do your thing, buddy.
Hello, world. Welcome.
Worldwide.
Episode 5. Okay, we're talking about the origins of anxiety and depression and OCD and orderliness today. Part 1. We're excited about this one. 2-part series. Before we get into that, we got some housekeeping to do.
Yeah.
First ever housekeeping. I do want to say I appreciate all the love that we're getting out there for the podcast. There's been some folks reaching out. You've had some friends reach out, right? It's pretty cool. Good feedback so far, right?
Yeah, no, everybody I've spoke to was positive, and that maybe they were just being nice, but I haven't gotten any other than some, fix your audio, fix your camera settings, which we're trying, as you can tell. I went to Hobby Lobby yesterday. I mean, give me a year or two and we're going to have the barnwood, the old fashioned barnwood stuff, paneling, and then like deer and beer bottles and stuff. I don't drink, Don't worry. But
give me a year. I'm just going to be an avatar on the screen.
You're going to be like Mark Zuckerberg and Lex Friedman when they were just in Meta having their conversation. Did you ever see that?
No, I didn't.
They did a podcast in Meta and with their virtual reality characters. Oh. And it looked cool.
I'm an alpha, so I would never be in Meta.
You would never do that. Yeah. My bad.
Yeah, you're good. We've got some love, some people, no death threats yet, but people are kind of trending in that way. Like, you're making me buy all of this salt. I have gallons and gallons of Redmond salt shipped to my door. I don't know what to do with it. Well, we just have that influence on people, I guess. On a more serious note, with housekeeping, actually, it's on salt. I didn't even think about that, but there was a listener who had a comment about the benefits of salt, and he was mentioning how he was just having a conversation with his son about hydration, and this guy's son is getting into lifting weights and just trying to get more hydrated as he's hitting that hard. I think this guy's a young gun, so he's probably we remember those days, the faux hundo on the back, which is a warm up for your dad. But anyway, so
we'll get to that later.
We'll get to that. Yeah, we'll have a whole dialogue and diorama about that. Anyway, on this, so this listener's son, he used to take supplements from someone named Jim Stepani. I think that's how you say it. Stoppani. Yep. Supplements. They're called Jim supplements, JYM. And then this Jim guy goes off on the mantra that he's a scientist and his products are based on that. But for his hydration product, he likes to use studies to validate that. And there's this whole big study about how salt is the best for hydration. And we have the link to that study, and we'll put that in the show notes if you want to check that out. So just kind of enhancing what we've talked about briefly in the past. We appreciate that.
And I've taken your advice. I've been using salt. I haven't gotten my hands on Redmond salt yet, but just some sea salt with hydration, flavor packets, some Crystal Light or whatever. Yeah. And I drink caffeine all day at work, and it dehydrates me pretty quickly. The caffeine acts in the distal collecting duct or something like that. Somebody's going to hear this and be like, that guy's an idiot.
Exactly what I was thinking.
But there's something called like aquaporins, these little channels on the sides of the last stop before it goes down your ureter into your bladder and your kidneys. Usually we pull water back. That's our last chance to pull water back into our circulatory system. But caffeine shuts those aquaporins down. And that's why it's a diuretic. And so I think we've talked about this. No, we haven't talked about this on here, but while hunting, while backpacking, while exercising, caffeine, yeah, if you're going to the gym, you're going to work out for 45 minutes. It's not a big deal. But if you need to stay hydrated going forward, and you don't have all day to rehydrate just sitting at a desk, then you probably should be careful with caffeine consumption, because it really does dehydrate people. And so, if you're really needing to stay hydrated, cut the caffeine, increase the salt, and let those aquaporins do that.
So what you're saying is the Dos Equis guy, he's in the wrong industry.
Yeah.
He's got the tagline, "Stay thirsty, my friend. Stay thirsty, my friends." And he really should be doing that for energy drinks.
Caffeine, yeah. Loser.
Yeah, if you want. Yeah. Well, let's see.
Should we get going to it, or is there more housekeeping? The Hunt Expo is this weekend. We have some friends and family with booths down there, but I haven't seen the booth yet. I don't know if they're actually set up. I've just heard. What was your experience down there? You just went yesterday, right?
Yeah. I mean, by the time this podcast is published, it won't be that time anymore. But at the time of this recording, yes, the Hunt Expo, the Western Expedition for Hunting and Conservation is happening right now in Salt Lake City. I went last night with the wife and kids. I was really just on a mission, just like trying to get good deals on gear. However, it was awesome. There were a lot of big names in the hunting industry there. I talked with a few of them. Some of them were very like down to earth. That was cool. There was a lot of, like every kind of big name line brand was there as well. And there were a lot of animals, a lot of outfitters, guides. It was just a cool environment. So I think I'm going to try and go down again just to have a better look at those upcoming and see the little guys, and see, are there things that they're developing to try and be the next big thing? I'm kind of interested in those people. So anyway, yeah, it was cool.
Okay.
Cool. Well, I'll start us off with kind of explaining this series. This is a 2-part series, and then we'll jump right into it, because I imagine this is going to be a little bit longer than usual. So just prepare yourself for that. But it is going to be like really beneficial. I would say, this is our 5th podcast. This is probably going to be, this 5th and 6th podcasts are probably going to be looked back on in a good way, like being referred to often. I think there's a lot of good content here. So in the 2-part series, that's a beaker, by the way, that Casey's drinking out of.
This is a Whiting. I couldn't escape it.
Yeah. There you go.
I was in a chemistry club in college. For taking last in all the tests, they gave me this flask. That's not true. I was pretty good at chemistry.
Of course.
With the ladies.
So 2-part series, we're talking about the origins of anxiety, orderliness, OCD, and depression. So mental health, kind of in a nutshell. We want to talk about like where it came from, what our ancient ancestors, how those mental health situations were for them, or might have been for them, and then also for today, what are good ways that we exhibit these behaviors, and also maybe some poor ways. And then on part 2 is going to be more so like solution based. So this is going to be a lot of information. And then part 2 is going to be like, some action. So education, action. So let's go ahead. We did have it on the lineup to do our shameless shout out. Let's do that in between orderliness and depression, just to kind of break it up. That's cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
So do you want to hit us off with anxiety?
Let's
Paint
do
the
it.
picture for us.
Yeah. Anxiety is, there's probably no human that feels like they've completely escaped the reach of anxiety in their human experience. I'm sure everybody at some point in their life, I mean, unless you were born with a malformed brain where the anxiety center doesn't exist or isn't active, like Alex Honnold probably doesn't have a whole lot of anxiety about stuff because he's born different and doesn't experience fear like most people. But and for people who don't know, Alex Honnold is a world famous free solo rock climber who just climbed El Capitan, and there's a cool Netflix documentary about it. But yeah,
you'll get anxiety if you watch it.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know where nature went wrong with Alex Honnold, but Netflix went right for us. So anxiety is an extremely common experience, and it is pretty intuitive. And it's all this is gonna make sense of the leading theories of why anxiety would exist today, why humans would have evolved a sense of anxiety with threats to themselves or perceived future threats to their safety, things like that. And then how today that same system is still active, sometimes gets active in instances where you wouldn't expect it or want it. But I'm going to try. It's been a little while since he and I ran over what we were going to talk about here, but this is obviously a serious passion of mine, a kind of a blend between my interest in mental health, which is a serious part of my medical practice, and then my interest, as well as Cole's, in who humans are and how we got to be this way. It just it's alleviating to be like, okay, there's a reason I feel this way. It's probably a relief for some people to be like, oh, biologically, I have systems that I didn't choose. I just have them, and they are designed to keep me safe in an environment that is constantly trying to take me down. And as soon as you start to step back and realize the context in which they evolved, it gets easier to see, okay, I get, why this social interaction is giving me anxiety. Because if I were living 6,000 years ago and this interaction was with a tribe leader and I was at risk of being exiled from the tribe, there would be a lot more on the line than, the manager at McDonald's. It's not the same thing. And our anxiety is not good at processing modern problems quite like it probably processed ancient problems. So I'll try and stick a little bit more with an outline, but essentially, go ahead.
So I've asked myself this question: why am I so worried about this? Why is this stressing me out? Why do I just get so freaked out about things, and other people too? Like, it might sound a little judgmental, but I'm like, why are you worried about that? You're okay. Like, things are all right. Which I probably say that to remind myself, because I do get stressed out and kind of overreact. But what you all just said, kind of in a nutshell, is we've inherited this. We've have it listed as, I like this wordage, a very sensitive alarm and warning system. And all animals have this system. If you spend time looking at animals, which we do quite a bit, you'll see how anxious they get in certain situations. Like, you remember on that elk scouting trip, we saw those cows approach that water, and they were just like, I'm not going to this water. I've seen things die here.
And we, hunters all around that pond, but just one ridge over, somebody killed a bear shortly thereafter, right? That was bear country. And so it makes sense why those elk would not feel safe just wandering out in the middle of the open.
Yeah, you could see it. And then, so basically, for our tech people out there, we have this software that's been passed down. However, the life-threatening situations are not the same anymore. We do have stressful situations, but when you're talking about life-threatening, being exiled from a group, that's a death sentence. Short-faced bears in your cave, death sentence. The list goes on and
not
on.
if you have a bunch of fire. Not if you have a big fire built.
That's right,
okay,
that's
yeah.
right.
I kind of got a little bit ahead of myself. To put a pin in what you were just saying, probably every animal, except for maybe a few apex predators, evolved a detection system for threat. And it's more sophisticated in some animals than others, but essentially it is taking in data from their environment and seeing which things pose a threat to their existence. And the things that pose a threat to their existence, they have options of either it's trying to escape as quickly as possible or potentially responding combatively. And humans, obviously, that's what we call fight or flight. There's a particular region in our brains and other animals' brains. Ours is in the hindbrain, the part of the brain that is not that far away from what a deer's brain looks like. They don't have the front of our brain, which is the one that can abstractly consider, oh, I'm going to build this architectural masterpiece with these big fan-like, and I'm going to build it out of cheese, a Swiss cheese that smells, which now we're talking. If somebody builds that tower and I don't get credit, but yeah, so it's a really incredible system. And if you've ever seen prey animals like deer in particular, they are on alert all the time. And maybe more specifically, it's interesting, but deer have made the quick adaptation in the last however many years. I'm assuming this is a quick adaptation that the male deer, the bucks, the mature bucks, they have a more sensitive alarm system because they literally are more sought after by predators, meaning modern day hunters, than does and fawns. And maybe they can learn that within just one lifetime, and it isn't something that they've actually adapted into their genome, but it probably kind of is because it doesn't take that long, right? Mm-hmm. If you're the male deer that isn't afraid of a human with a bow and arrow, you don't have babies the next spring, right? And so the ones that were, they're kicking and they're passing down their offspring. And everybody forever that was not afraid of really serious threats, they died. And the people that were afraid, to a point of getting away from the threat or handling the threat or planning for the future so that the threat didn't take them down, they lived and they passed down their genetics to us. And so we have this really threat sensitive DNA and brain that is awesome at thinking about the future and saying, okay, this could go wrong. What can I do? And you ruminate, and eventually, hopefully you come up with a conclusion. And we'll probably get a little bit more to that, how it manifests today as well. And because we still have to come up with solutions for stuff, but yeah,
well,
that's kind of,
let's get into that. Let's talk about how it manifests today. Our first point is, you kind of gave this analogy that it's like the immune system. Anxiety exhibits itself within the brain like the immune system does. Do you want to speak to that? And then I'll hit like the good parts of anxiety after you're done.
Yeah. And is it okay if I kind of go all the way into the whole asthma thing that I talked to you about?
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Asthma, eczema, IBS. Yeah. All that.
So I was thinking the other day, I don't know what I was supposed to be doing, but I was thinking about why would we have evolved asthma, right? Is it purely a modern problem because we have Red 40 and, your favorite flavor, Red 40? Does Red 40 taste like anything, or is it just a color?
Oh, it's delicious.
You wouldn't know.
40 times better than Red one. I don't know.
But I was just wondering if this is a response to modern environmental crap, or if this is something that's been with humans for a long time. And so I looked and found there were reports of some of the most ancient societies describing conditions that sounded exactly like asthma. And so I then tried to find theories on why asthma would have come about, even in ancient societies that didn't have all of the crap that you would think is aggravating our immune systems. And it seems like it's a really potent, it seems like it's a result of having a really powerful machine called the immune system that has to be running absolutely perfectly to detect things that are harmful to you, with enough specificity, like they're not missing things and they're not overly acting on things that they don't need to react to, right? And so the what do I do with my hands? So the point is, the immune system is so potent that if things go a little bit wrong in the gene formation of an individual in their personal development, even if it's not some big environmental problem, your immune system, whether it be your skin, your lungs, your colon, it can get a little bit hyperactive, and it can start to look at your own tissues as potentially problematic by accident. And that's just because it's such a potent machine, and everything has to be absolutely perfect, like a rocket ship, for it to sail perfectly, and sometimes things aren't. And so you can be immunocompromised by having it be underactive, or you can be autoimmune, right, by having it be a little bit overactive. And I think that the same thing applies to our threat sensitivity center in our brain, right? And so we should be sensing a healthy amount of threat and be able to be made anxious by a list of real threats to our safety. And in some people, they don't get that anxious about anything, and they probably should be. And they're kind of, they're probably at risk of not making it because they're not thinking of things that can take them down. And there's also people who are like that hyperactive immune system in an asthmatic individual that are just obsessive about threats to themselves to the point where it debilitates them. And I think that just like asthma, there's therapies, there's ways to fix that, but I would guess that real serious clinical anxiety is just a hyperactive threat detection center in our brain. And whether that is from your lived experience, being traumatized by things that, burned into your amygdala. Sorry, amygdala in Spanish is something else. It's your tonsils. So I get confused. Amygdala, right? That's the place in the back of your brain, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, that's the threat center. And if you are severely traumatized, like there's serious data about this with PTSD, there is like a shock that occurs in your amygdala. They can see on functional MRI and stuff with serious trauma that can prime your amygdala to be hyperactive forever, or can shut parts of it down. I don't know. It's been such a long time, but the point is, this can be in development or it can be in your life, but either way, when it goes overboard, and it is debilitating for people.
Yeah, I think I wish we could detect that, but I think that there's a lot of truth there when you first shared that with me, given that, the overcorrection in so many different areas of our body, producing things that flare up, asthma, eczema, irritable bowel syndrome, just a lot of things, the overcorrection. And then why wouldn't that be happening, in my opinion, the most superior organ, the brain, right? So when we hear the word anxiety or depression today, I don't know about you, but I see that as a negative connotation. It's a bad thing, right? But there are a lot of good instances of anxiety in particular, and we'll go over the good and the bad for each of these, but I'll just rattle off a few on the good. So the good side of anxiety today is it's essentially you're having the fear of not being able to do these things, like things that will get you out of bed or get you to work or go to your job or protect your young. Treat your partner with care to bring longevity to your relationships. People that are very high disciplined. I like Jocko Willink, if you've ever listened to him, like extremely, like stay on the warpath. Good. Your dog died. Good. You can get over it and strengthen yourself.
You killed it.
Like
better.
Like, yeah. And I know we're kind of poking fun. Jocko, please don't come attack us. We've got respect for you. But he's a very high disciplined person, and so are many other people that serve in the military. But, you have anxiety, like if you don't get out of bed and go to work, like there might be some stress to do so, because there is the fear of, if you don't do that, what's going to happen? If you don't, eat 3 meals a day, what's going to happen? If you don't, all of these different things, right? If you don't treat your partner with respect and care and love, are they going to leave you? That's anxiety. And I think that it's generally a good thing. It helps bring out drive and good qualities in people. Yeah. So I'd see it as a good thing.
It promotes action. Like that is the reason that you do anything, is anxiety for what the alternative is. If you don't do this, you fear this outcome, and that drives you. I mean, there's also, maybe there's, instead of fear-based, there's excitement-based activities, like, oh, I want this thing, so I'll do this, rather than I don't want the absence of that thing, But I think for the most part, I want to make a good living, because I fear what my life would be like if I didn't live up to the potential and the gifts and the talents and the opportunities. Like, what would I feel like for the rest of my life if I didn't try and maximize that? Not really because I just want to have a nice house or a nice whatever, but because I know what that would do to me emotionally if I just kind of coasted through life and always took the path of least resistance. I would not be happy with myself. Yeah. So the fear of that is what gets me out of bed for sure.
Yeah. And I think kind of just the last thought on this side of things, I'm reminded of a basketball player. I'd guess and say the name, but I can't remember, but I know that he's a professional. There are some people that will step up to a big stage and they're, to quote Outcast, they're cooler than a polar bear's toenails. They're just cool. Like, they're ready. I'm going to perform. I'm good to go. Then you have other people like me. Anytime I ever play, basketball, it could be a rec game. Like, I just feel sick to my stomach. I do. And I have to visit the bathroom, and then I'm ready to play. Like, I get so nervous and anxious. And this basketball player was like, that's not a bad thing. It's just a sign to show that you care. If you're feeling anxious or a little bit stressed to, do these things, take action, you're showing that you care about those things, the outcome of those things and the relationships. So, cool. And then transitioning to the bad side, did you have something you want to add?
Yeah, no, I heard almost the same exact analysis. I don't know if it was Joe Rogan himself or him quoting somebody else that made this observation, but it was the same thing about fighters. Like, if you're not terrified going into a boxing match, that's because you're stupid. Because you really are in harm's way. And if you aren't amped up and on edge and scared, then you can't comprehend what you're getting yourself into. And I think in time with me, like as a kid, your whole world is like, all you do is you go to school and you have an older sister and brother and you play rec baseball. And those are the only 3 things. And so rec baseball is like, oh, if I don't do this right, what are these people going to think of me? What is that going to mean when I get to this age? Are my friendships going to deteriorate? Are my parents not going to pay for my college? And a smart kid, unfortunately, a smart kid can process all this stuff. And my experience in basketball was some of the brightest kids on our team. They were the ones that manifested much more anxiety about the game than others. I played with a lot of guys who are real thinkers, engineers, scientists today. And they were, all of them felt like us, like just high strung. The second you got on the court, it's like, okay. And because I guess, and I think part of it is they probably overestimated the implications of failure in our level of basketball. We were not playing for we weren't playing for the NBA. But I mean, there's social implications and there's familial implications of not performing in a sport. And maybe long term, if you don't perform in a sport, that sets a precedent in your mind. And you're like, I can't be a guy that fails at this thing. And so there's a lot to it. It's complicated, and I don't know that much about it. I'm just talking out of my rear. But being anxious about stuff, especially in young kids, probably is representation of their ability to think and their ability to process information and think forward. I was a very anxious child, and I hope that I can tie that back to being a little bit more of a thinker as an adult.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been far too positive. I think we should probably get a little negative here. No, we're just trying to change the world, man, with this anxiety. So much there's good with it. So yeah, the bad sides, I mean, they're going to be obvious when I list them, but irritability, I'm stressed out, dude, leave me alone. Have you seen that meme? Kids, be quiet. Patricia, have you seen that?
No, but I want to.
Dude, I got it
now. We can play it. But yeah, well, you have to show me.
So funny. So yeah, irritability, indecisiveness. I'm too stressed out. I can't decide what to do in the situation. There's a lot of pressure. And then you had mentioned this one, which I loved, was laziness is freezing that fight or flight. If you're lazy, you're not running away from the situation and you're not combating the situation. You're doing nothing. You're linear, and you're crumbling to that anxiety or that pressure, which when I say these things, I don't want anyone to feel like, oh, I have all those things. I'm a horrible person. I'm doing everything wrong. Oh, I'm starting to get stressed because Cole said that. No, like, take a deep breath. It's okay. I get all of these things, weekly, and I think more people do than we realize, and that's all right. Like, this is our software. This is what we're wired to do. However, that's why we're breaking this up in 2 parts so that you'll listen to the solutions one. Maybe you can do some things to help with that, but we're not going to talk about those right now. So, yeah. Anything to add?
You have to wait. Enjoy another week of pain. Yeah. Well, no, not really. I'm sure we'll have to spend future episodes. I'd love to get into the examples and the science and, put us in the context of a caveman, essentially a prehistoric man or woman that is living in the natural world with real relationships. And they've got like 6 people around them or 70 people around them. And if something goes wrong, I mean, there is not safety net after safety net after safety net in a society that can buoy them up. It is over. They die. And so the importance of every single decision that they made was legit. Like it was life or death for them. And today you can just make dumb decision after dumb decision after dumb decision. And you come see me at the clinic for free. And I, get you free medications because, and then you just keep living, and we get you a free place to stay, and we get people sent to your house to coach you, And it's like, whoa, that did not exist ever until right now. And the fact that it didn't exist is why everything seems so important, because it always has been so important until now. Now you can just kind of screw around and live at mom's house forever. Sorry if you live at mom's house. I lived at mom's house for a long time.
Same. I lived at mother-in-law's house.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, shall we move to the next topic? So we've titled this Orderliness and OCD. OCD, I think everyone should know what that is at this point, but obsessive compulsive disorder. I'll paint the picture of what this looked like back then, and then you're going to talk about something after that. You're going to tie some things back to your passion and understanding the world around you. I think that's going to be your cue. But basically,
we'll try.
Orderliness in the ancient setting, it's cultivating predictability. Is my cave clean? You know, there's predators that are going to try and kill me. If you're afraid of predators today, just do an hour of research of what it was like back then. We said here, there's no shadows for things to lurk, you know, things meaning creatures. There's no openings, filth, disease. Is my spear in the proper position if I need to react quickly in the night? You know, is my domicile sturdy if a blizzard rips through in the middle of the night, but I can keep my tribe warm? Is the fire the right distance away from these kids that roll around the cave all night? And if not, for any of those things, death is surely knocking on the door. You know, do we have any examples? Can we pull a caveman on the podcast? No, we can't. But you could imagine that there are a lot of people that, if they didn't have things in check, gone. So just being able to act when you're needed, that's what stemming this orderliness and OCD, getting things right, organized, clean, system thinking, so that I can then react. I'll hand it off to you.
Yeah, I mean, that the imagery of having essentially a hut or a cave in perfect working condition to minimize the risks to your life. It makes sense. I mean, if you just throw rotten food around, sorry, I thought somebody's coming downstairs. If you throw rotten food around and you kind of just toss your spear outside of the shelter, and you build your fire next to the wall, too close to the wall, it doesn't vent properly, you aren't obsessive, or you don't feel a compulsion to do everything just right, then, you know, your chances of survival go down. With all these things, survival is just like dependent on a balance between the right amount of bravery, but anxiety, orderliness, but not obsessiveness, because you still need to get up in the morning and go out and find food. You can't spend all your day tidying every log. I mean, in a large group, you can be the person that tidies up, assures up every little piece of the fortress. But, and that's why, you know, we're different. And there can be people that exist like that, and they survive and they pass on their genes, because we weren't always alone. We were in some smaller groups. And so, you know, being the obsessor or being the hyperactive outdoor hunter or gatherer or the singer or the goofball, they all had their role. And if the group was large enough, you could get more extreme people that fit a niche within the group, and they passed their genes down. But for the most part, everybody kind of had to have a fair balance of a lot of these things. And that's why most people have a fair balance of a lot of these characteristics of a little bit of orderliness, a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of adventurousness, a little bit of openness to experience. Nothing, you know, we mostly sit in the gray area, in the middle of the bell-shaped distribution. And then these people on the outsides, they either make it big or they don't make it. And depending on how big your tribe or society is, their chances of living were probably higher. But yeah. So any thoughts before I try and explain what that has meant to me, orderliness?
Just a quick one to anyone who's maybe late on the evolution train. Like imagine a man and a woman, they keep things real tidy back in those days. And then you have, the hut next door, some doofus who's, the fire's going too high in the hut and it burns the hut down and, the whole family dies in the middle of the night. Like their seed did not get passed on. But the person who's tidy, they did. Not only did that DNA get passed on and passed on and passed on, but also, I don't know how it verbally or just by example, but that is being taught to the seed.
Story. Yeah.
And that is just, passed on. Like, no, at no point do we ever do that. That's a no-no. We always do this. And this is why, because hut next door caught on fire last night or whatever, Yeah. That is the slow evolution. And it's alive today. Like there's things that you do and I do as parents for our own families. And it's evolved from what our parents did and it will continue to evolve. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Yeah, I like that. So I think when we had talked about this first, I kind of said that I felt some relationship with this concept because in my experience, something we alluded to in episode 1 was that I am kind of hyper focused on understanding the world. And no, I don't spend my days trying to get geopolitical conflict under control in my mind. I'm trying to understand, like, where do we really come from? Is there anything supernatural about this experience? What is the actual meaning? Where should I actually put my time? Which things will actually bring me satisfaction or optimize my survival? And I obsessively think about these things because at the end of the day, I think I have inherited and developed this style of trying to understand my environment, just like a caveman in a tidy cave or hut, know where everything is so I can sleep comfortably. If I know the fire is far enough away from the wall and I've checked it and I've done the research and I've asked all my neighbors and I said, hey, is 2 feet good enough? I was trying to think of a caveman metric system, but I couldn't. That's for next week. And so I think personally, I have my world because we have so much time. Like I have a warm house and I have a 401k that's getting money dumped into it. And so I'm like, okay, now I got to think about the big stuff. And so I'm spending a lot of time thinking about big things, but in the same way, a cave person would be considering their habitation and saying, is everything in place? Is there something that could get me that I'm not seeing? And I've had those thoughts about particular religious levels of zeal. Like if I'm super zealous about this particular religious or political thing, or any, I mean, that's really all there is, religion and politics. I don't know what other social identity you can adopt, but if I'm super zealous about this and I'm wrong, could it kill me? Could somebody take advantage of me? And so I think those things I just started to think about them the same way. And I told Cole about this, but when I was a kid, when I was probably my most anxious, which was like, I don't know, a 7-year-old kid, an 8-year-old kid, I would get very afraid at night. Very afraid. I'm almost getting chills just thinking. No, I'm just kidding. I was very afraid at night. And I told Cole this, and I think he might have a response, but told Cole about this a long time ago and how I always will make sure my kids don't go to bed alone. And that was intuitive. That was natural for me. I hadn't heard anybody talk about that, but since I have seen researchers, brain development researchers talk about how it actually is probably appropriate for kids to not go to bed alone, even though it's kind of inconvenient. It is where a human being, and specifically a child, is the most vulnerable they'll be all day, where they go unconscious. And to do that transition from the conscious to the unconscious, alone in the dark, when you're a helpless little kid that knows they can't defend themselves, even though they only know that subconsciously, that is scary for a lot of children. And for me as a kid, that was real scary, man. I would I couldn't fall asleep. And once I'd fall asleep, even if my mom would sit in there with me or whatever, I'd wake up in the night and I would full on hallucinate that it wasn't like, shadows through a window. I'd see animals and non-animals and stuff on the ceilings and the walls. And it was terrifying. And so I just naturally would in case my kid's like that, which most kids aren't, in case my kid's like that, I'm going to not let her experience that, because it took, I don't know, when I was 10, I think kids just grow out of it. 7, 8, 9, 10, you grow out of it just naturally. So if you can get your kid to age 7, you don't have to do that with them. You don't have to think also that you're going to have to sleep by them forever while they go to sleep, because they will grow out of it. But in those early years, if they have that need, you should probably attend to it. And I totally went on a tangent. I think it was a good tangent, but the point is when I was a real anxious kid around bedtime at 7 years old, I fully had OCD, and I would organize everything in my room, and I would tidy up the bathroom in perfect lines and turn the labels on the soap dispensers. And, I'd never heard of OCD or anything. I was just doing this spontaneously, and nobody in my family had it. Nobody did that. And I used to think isn't that kind of weird that I do that? And I didn't really get a lot of feedback about it. Nobody was ever like, oh, this is why or anything. And maybe nobody knew, but I would tidy everything up and I'd pee so I'd get my bladder fully empty so I wouldn't wake up in the night, and I would sprint and get in my bed. And if I didn't fall asleep immediately, I'd go back and redo the routine. But that was me trying to tidy up as a kid, trying to tidy up my cave, put my spear in this position near the door, and make sure the fire was this far away. And so I felt safe. And I think orderliness in general in human beings is an attempt to make sure that their immediate environment is predictable. And OCD is kind of like the generalized anxiety disorder of that, where it goes awry, it goes too far.
Yeah.
So yeah, sorry, that was a lot.
No, it's important. And I told you this, but for our listeners, I'm thankful that Casey shares that openly, and now he's sharing that with so many people, because I've got a kid now that is very, very afraid of the dark. I think way more than what you would see as normal. And because he shared that, I could either have taken the route of saying, fuck up, man, everyone had to do it. But I didn't, because you shared that. I'm more so I will respond with love. I will be there for you until you don't need me to be anymore. I've got you, and as long as that needs to be, I know it's not going to be forever, but I'm not going to regret responding that way. So you've had a big influence in that regard. So yeah, transitioning to orderliness and OCD today, there's a lot of good that comes out of it. A lot of these are just gonna, you probably already have them in your head, but general cleanliness, it's good to be clean and clean your home and get rid of any pathogens or whatever. Clean air and clean water, general upkeep, keeping things tidy, as far as we mentioned, hygiene as well, maybe health as well, orderliness in your health, your vitamin, your diet, whatever. Also organized. I'm really big into things have their places, so that when I need that thing, I know where to go. I know the place that it's assigned, because sometimes I need things in a hurry and then I go and get it, and I know I've memorized where everything is. And I think this one's a big one for me, orderliness. I definitely have an issue with it, maybe on the hyper side of it. Then another good one is like preppers. So, people preparing for the worst, calamity. You've got people that are, preparing food and toiletries and water and generators and communication skills like ham radio. Like they've like prepared for the worst. So they're very in order for when things strike, they're ready to go. I think the other thing, which is really interesting, what is the good of orderliness? Beauty and art and architecture. Like, even though there is some architecture and art that is a little, off the walls, but it is taking things, it's ordering your thoughts and your mind and the environment around you and showing that in a physical form, or, it could be music or whatever that's ordering that. I think that's a good thing. And then these other ones are like really, really important. Government is an ordered structure, law, as well as like budgeting as an individual or as a family. You're keeping good order. You're keeping all those. And the same thing goes as when we mentioned the good things of anxiety. What is going to happen to me if I don't do this? If I don't keep my domicile clean? If I don't, organize or prep for the worst? That could be life's on the line. I don't know about if I don't paint this painting, what's going to happen to me? Probably nothing. But, if there isn't law, or if I'm not budgeting, that could have big implications down the road. Things could really compound. And then, there's the bad side of it too. But before we get to that, any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, orderliness has made the incredible societies that exist around the world just ever increasing order and planning and cleanliness and expectations have made for very cooperative, massive, successful societies. And unfortunately, some of that's kind of going haywire, not overly orderly like happened in the mid 20th century, because that did happen in Germany. Kind of like that is where that can go too far. But but I mean, I'm not a history buff, so I'm not going to go any further on that point. But yeah, for the most part, it's a lack of this, which is seen everywhere else around the world, except for, a few civilizations that have it pretty together. Utah, where we both live, is a very orderly place. It's and it's changing a little bit too, probably, but it has been a very clean and polite and beautiful place because of the cultural heritage that a lot of people had and the motivation to make this a thriving community. And a lot of that is probably inherited culturally, and a lot of it just we're born with because it keeps us safe.
Yeah. And not just born with, but passed down from generations and generations, been refining it. So yeah, the bad sides of orderliness or OCD has that negative connotation attached to it is, being hyper-focused in that sense. You're not aware of your surroundings. You're so focused on these systems around you and like making sure everything's right and like being very, I guess, like picky about certain things. And you're not self-aware of people around you, danger around you, etc., which that was the purpose of orderliness in the first place, right? To respond to danger. And then over-organizing. So just like spending way too much time or making everything perfect, and then it gets messed up and then you have to fix it up. And, you're spending all your time just fixing up one thing all day. And then, I would say, I think routines are good, but it's also, sometimes it's real good in life to be free instead of just like a robot following a strict schedule. So that's another kind of bad side to it.
Okay.
Cool, man. Well, now time for our break. I'm going to hand it off to you. We got a shameless shout out. This one's pretty important.
Yeah. This is a non-specific shameless shout out, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Well, I can't even see it. Oh yeah, there it is. Yeah. So, shameless shout out is essentially any resource that allows you to address your mental health appropriately if needed. Because of where I work, I'm very much inclined to say, talk to a therapist. I work in Western medicine, and our society is totally cool with people seeing a therapist, even if it's mild, like life planning stuff. And you're just like, hey, I don't know where to put my time or energy, and it's keeping me up at night. I just want to bounce some things off a therapist. Great. If this is, I don't want to be here anymore, and I'm thinking every day about how I can make that happen, that's a really much more important time to see a therapist. And we also did want to plug, if you really are having self-harm thoughts, first of all, you should talk to somebody around you, because you would be surprised how many people actually do care, even though you don't feel like they do. So definitely talk to the first person that you think might care about you, because they almost certainly will care deeply and will help you through whatever you're going through. And then if that doesn't work, the suicide hotline is 988, right? Not 911, 988.
Yeah. And so it used to be a longer number, and they've condensed it now, which is nice.
Yeah.
It's kind of news to me. 988. A couple things to add on that. I love this idea of this being this shameless shout out. If you don't have anybody in your life, or you feel, alone, this might seem weird, but like, reach out to us. We care. There's not one person on this entire planet that I would want to see them go through self-harm or take their lives. Really, really like somber to be thinking about that. And it's far too close to so many of our lives. I'll share very briefly. I've had some experiences with it personally. And so we're definitely advocates for this topic. And then on the other side, I mean, it doesn't have to be so stark. You don't have to have those problems to seek out therapy. Like couples therapy, it's great. I've done it, and it like was, it really helps you break through. Well, and you can do it through, a provider, and there's online services. Check your works insurance. A lot of that could be paid for already, but, or, go outside, like get some therapy with some friends that way. But I also think be a friend, like check in on people more often than you think, is a good suggestion. Just be a friend to people. And maybe they won't need to take those steps, and, you can't care too much. And I would also say, if you feel like, oh, well, I don't really want to do that, that's awkward, I don't really want to face anyone, everything aside, money aside, everything, like you are the most important part of your life. It's your life. You're the author of it. And invest in yourself. So spend that time seeking out help and therapy.
Yeah. You only get one chance at life. If getting sucked into that rabbit hole of those thought processes that seem like nothing's ever going to get better, and then ending it would be a real tragedy for you and everybody around you.
Yeah.
Things can always get better. Things can get worse too, but might as well see if they get better.
Yeah, you said
they probably can't get worse.
Chance.
They probably can't get worse for most people if that's where you are. And so they're more likely than not to get better.
You said you only have one chance. I thought you were going to break out into some M&M. One opportunity, don't let it slip. Just talk about spaghetti. I'll bleach my hair. Okay, last topic, and then we're going to bring this on home. I appreciate it. Stand up if you've been sitting down listening to this. Stretch those joints out or whatever. Tomorrow. Yeah, pause it, come back tomorrow. It is a 2-part series, but this is so interesting, the depression portion of it. Talking about in the kind of the ancient sense, you said it boils down to energy conservation. I love this, by the way. Do you want to take this, paint this picture?
Yeah. I'm going to try. And I did a lot of homework on this. And there's one other hypothesis that I can address at the end that makes some sense too, but that might be for a different day because this just is so much information, right? But there's another hypothesis that's a tiny bit different, but and maybe I'll give a one-liner about it at the end. But yeah, essentially, the theories, the hypotheses that I've heard serious scientists, evolutionary biologists, and psychologists talk about to explain why depression would have existed in ancient and modern humans was that in maybe I should look at the notes to make sure I don't go, no, this is right. In the ancient world and the modern world, if your environment is kicking your butt, if your efforts to erect a building or to harvest food or to fend off an enemy that keeps trying to encroach on your land, if those things aren't working and your life, you're expending energy needlessly or uselessly because you're trying the same thing and it's just not working, it might be a good idea to go sit down, lay down, withdraw, seclude yourself and ruminate and think, what is going wrong? Why is this all failing for me? And the hypothesis that I have seen is that is why depression exists, because in the ancient world, people were met with difficulty and adversity. And if they pushed and pushed and pushed and they couldn't get through something, it may have been a better use of their time to conserve some calories, to go sit down, withdraw, and just start to process what is happening. Why am I failing? What, how have I gotten to this point? What are all the factors? Is this me? Is this the environment? And if they would go withdraw, save their calories, and maybe spend some time in their own mind rather than out in the field, they could come up with an alternative approach to survival. And I mean, seasonal depression is an example to put this, to make this more understandable for people. Seasonal depression is extremely common. People in the winter, modern humans in the winter, specifically at higher latitudes like us, they will get depressed when it gets dark outside because it's dark all the time. And it would make sense that in the winter, when resources are not plentiful and when the conditions are more harsh, that you would be more prone to withdraw from the natural world and just kind of like hang tight. Obviously, we don't hibernate, but it's a behavior that isn't that unlike hibernating if you are depressed in a Nordic country in those days where you get like 6 hours of sunlight. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So, and I have some of those, we all have some of those. Well, that's not true. A lot of us have some of those genetics from really cold climates, people that lived in places where it was, and I don't want to say this is exclusively a Nordic or, like a Inuit problem of seasonal depression, but but maybe it's possible that seasonal depression is more common in people who inherited genetics from those regions, and people who came from more temperate regions inherited different genetics that would manifest in a different way that isn't so dependent on the seasons, but is more dependent on maybe in like the dead of heat. Maybe the hottest months you would find in people who have genetics that come from those regions, maybe they experience their depression there. Well, I'd be surprised, but if it was true, it'd be like, holy crap, that would make some sense according to this theory.
We the North. We both come from this expression.
Is that Game of Thrones or something?
No, I think it's the Toronto Raptors, to be honest. We the North. Well, you and I, we come from northern seas, our bloodlines. You more than I, but anyway. Yeah, so I like that, because depression, I'm so depressed. Depression, like, that's probably the granddaddy of them all with the negative connotation. It's not seen as good. And everything you just said sounds like really good. And you said, yeah, you might have to force yourself, but a lot of times it comes naturally. If at first you don't get it right or succeed, like, you're like, oh, what the hell's going on here? Why aren't we succeeding? I'm putting everything into this. I prepared for it. I've got things in order. It's just not working. Let me take a break and recharge and come back. Like that, taking a break is depressing. It's de-escalating the situation. Maybe you're a little bit sad about what's going on, the results, and then you just come back stronger. You've added some thoughts here. Did you have anything else you wanted to touch on?
Well, this just clicked in my mind while you're talking. I had forgotten I'd written down those extra thoughts, but they came back to my mind that another feature of depression is there is a pretty obvious outward expression of how depressed people are feeling. They withdraw, they look sad, they look like they're in pain, they'll cry, right? They look like they're in physical pain sometimes. And this is the individual who I heard putting forward this hypothesis. And maybe I should link some of the videos where I got a lot of this information from, and the text. I don't just watch videos, but I prefer to, because I have, problems, and I can almost only just watch videos. But anyway, with depression, people signal just like they do with physical pain, psychic pain, emotional pain. They also signal outwardly, and the signaling is a call for help. It is sitting in a corner and crying and, looking like everything's going wrong can signal to somebody in your tribe or in your family, like, what's up? Like, why are you hurt? And that might give, well, that's so cool. Yeah, that would then put you in a position to be given aid or support or direction from somebody else in your tribe. Maybe things aren't going well for you personally, and somebody is willing to put their arm around you, help you with obtaining resources, whatever it may be. And if things were going badly for you and you didn't show it, you would likely just starve to death, right? But if you show it in a similar way that you would show physical pain, you might garner the attention of those around you who likely care about your survival as well. And therefore they can combine efforts with you and bring you back into a state of thriving. And so I thought that like the expression of psychic pain translating to getting actual help, I thought that was quite interesting. And then after you say something, I have one more on the thought on the same topic.
Yeah, and not to get into like the depression today, right? Sounds like a news title. But we're still talking about the past, but I would say you see that evident in, you have a partner who's just had a day, and you can tell it, without them even talking, you just feel it. Then immediately you're like, okay, let me step this up. The expectations for you are going down, and like, go recharge. Let's make sure you're right. And then, I'll step it up and cover for you. Or, that can be evident in friendships, families, teammates. I know that my wife does that for me, and I try to do my best for her when she's in those situations. But yeah, I like that a lot.
Okay, can I plug one more before we
talk? Yeah, let's hear it.
Well, maybe it's kind of the same, but yeah, I'll just say it now. So there's a couple of things. First, I'll talk about suicidal ideation and suicide attempts, and then I got to talk about gender differences. Just don't let me forget to talk about that. So the suicide attempt thing, for most humans, especially for females who experience more attempts, but I think in the numbers, it's way different. Females experience many more attempts, and males tend to be more lethal in their attempts. But the numbers are like 50 to 1 or 100 to 1 of female attempts to completions. And those are big numbers, like 99 attempts, and you don't make it to the next life. That is like, oh, were you actually trying to end it? And the answer, evolutionarily and in the modern context, is probably not. And meaning, if you're not following me super closely, meaning that a lot of suicide attempts, especially in the modern world, probably are calls for help, because the psychic pain that you've been demonstrating nobody's giving you the help that you think you need. And so once you attempt to take your own life, like, that is a massive scream to the people around you, like, oh, this person needs some serious attention. They don't even want to exist anymore. And can
I say something with that?
Yeah, please.
So I think that people don't really understand, someone who cuts their wrist, slits their wrist or whatever, right? They're like, why would you do that? Generally speaking, I maybe hear that. But for someone who is like had my mind in maybe a similar realm to people that have done that, I would say like self-harm, not just in the sense of, taking it to the extreme and wanting to end your life, but also causing yourself self-harm. That could be through, I don't know, could be through drugs, it could be through alcohol, it could be, through razor blades, whatever. But that is the way to like outwardly show, hey, everyone, I'm not okay up here.
Yeah.
Like it's right here. This is my outward expression of what is going on, this battle in my head. I need help. I don't know how to get that. So I wanted to maybe someone out there that helps them see that better. That's what these people are doing. I mean, I don't need to look that up. Like, I know that's what they're doing. They're trying to show that.
That's interesting, because I'd never really thought about that particular self-harm behavior or any self-harming behavior, but I had just kind of thought, oh, well, it's like an adrenaline release, or it's like a pain reliever to like make it physical pain rather than, but then that makes that much sense on their own. It makes more, I mean, you can pinch yourself. I can pinch myself and get a lot of pain. I could just pinch myself all day if it was looking for pain. But to leave a mark on your body that shows other people, that something's wrong and I'm hurting myself, that is an interesting, way to communicate internal turmoil, pain. Yeah. So that's an interesting thing. I did not know about suicidal behaviors. And just recently I saw a young lady in the clinic who talked to me about, I think she had 3 attempts. One of them was just last week, and they were all pretty benign. They were pills, right? Each time pills. And she described to me which pills she took and how many each of the times. And I think each time she kind of let people know shortly thereafter. So they could help, right? They could get her to the hospital. It wasn't like break your phone, throw it in the river, wander off into the woods, or drive off into the woods, throw your keys into the river so you can't get back. Like, no, that would be, I don't even want to say a more effective way, because I don't want to give anybody ideas, but hopefully if they're getting this far in the podcast, they're not going to go that direction anyway. But yeah, most of these attempts are not that lethal, and they are absolutely cries for help. And it's sad that people have to get that far. Yeah. That they, that their life pushes them that far, that's what they have to do to get people to say, hey, I love you, you're valuable, and maybe people say it and they don't understand it because of some other blockage in their mind. But yeah,
well, it's unfortunate. Maybe people just aren't saying it. I think I could do a better job at it.
Often the case. Yeah. Okay. And then one quick thing that I was fantastic. This is so exciting to learn about. Okay. First of all, one thing I had heard Jordan Peterson talk about years ago. Jordan Peterson is a really well-known clinical psychologist who's now like a public speaker, but a sharp guy, but he talked about postpartum depression and how around the time, and he did an interview recently, which if anybody messages me and asks about it, he interviewed some evolutionary biologist, a female, and they talked about birth control, and that was riveting. And there are similar patterns there, but women around the time of giving birth tend to have like a fan on the flame when it comes to neuroticism, trait neuroticism, predisposition to a negative emotion. So they'll be more anxious, more depressed, more irritable, things like this. And a lot of times it's full-blown postpartum depression, right? And it's like, why would you have a baby? This is what you wanted. Why are you so depressed? You're supposed to be happier than ever. But you wind back Father Time's clock, and we think about the environment in which humans existed, and the one time where it'd be a really good idea to be sensitive to threats is when you are vulnerable, recovering from having delivered a child, and you have a tiny little baby that could be torn apart with ease, and you have to take care of it independently, or for the most part. And so if your threat detection centers go up like crazy and you become more reclusive because you're just trying not to get killed or not put yourself in harm's way or detect any threat whatsoever and escape, like that makes so much sense why women would experience that radical shift in the way they perceive others' interactions with them. Like talk to any woman who had issues with breastfeeding, around the time of having given birth, which is a really sensitive subject. But to a woman who just gave birth and whose alert system is on level 10, it's explosive. And so I mean, when I learned about that, I was just over the moon because it made so much sense.
Yeah. And, wow, yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
Super interesting. And it makes all the sense in the world to me. That's cool.
Can I say
too bad I wasn't more aware of it for the last 3 pregnancies. Sorry, babe.
So the other observation was, I mean, that this one ties in perfectly with that last thought or idea about your most sensitive time in your life, your most threatened time in your life being after having a baby, is that they did research on the differences in depression levels between men and women, because not everybody knows. Anybody who studied this knows that women tend to be much more prone to experience depression in life. And that's an unfortunate thing for women. But again, Father Time, let's wind that clock and start to look at why. And it, the theory that, or the hypothesis that I had heard, which seems like obvious, seems like it could be written in the back of the Bible at this point, would be, or the Doctrine and Covenants, would be, that's another episode. I got to cut this out after the fact.
Okay. No, it's all good. Dude.
Okay, so go back with Father Time and say, why would women be more prone to depression or anxiety than men? What's the deal? It has almost everything to do with upper body strength. Because women literally, because of biology and how it made men almost in all instances stronger with their upper bodies than almost all women, it made them very much threatened by everyday interactions. Almost any man could assault them or take advantage of them if their systems weren't keen and prepared and on alert and watching out for themselves and their children. And so that is like, oh, that makes sense. But the crazy part is this scientist who I was learning about his work recently, they did a pretty massive study, and they controlled for upper body strength among men and women, like bench press, pull-up strength, that kind of stuff. And they found zero difference in depression levels when upper body strength was controlled for.
Huh.
So if you're a jacked chick, your likelihood of being depressed is much lower than a very fragile, weak male. And so it essentially erased the difference between men and women. And in the real world, if you're as strong as your male counterpart, then you really don't have that much more reason to be threatened. You're the same thing, you know? You can defend yourself as easily as they can. And so, I mean, that's just crazy. They found zero difference in depression when upper body strength was accounted for. And some of that probably might have to do with a little bit of testosterone, but not entirely, because there's women who you check their testosterone level, a CrossFitter, and it's not going to be the same as a man who's never worked out and can't lift weights, that just makes it naturally. This is not purely a testosterone thing, even though testosterone does tend to make people less depressed. Women who transition to be a male and start injecting testosterone, they're like, I feel amazing. I've never been this non-anxious or chill or happy. And so it's not just the testosterone, but I'm sure that's a part of it. But yeah. So start lifting weights, ladies. That's next week's episode mostly, but this is a little teaser. Start lifting weights.
Yeah. We're forecasting the stock prices of bench presses to go up once this episode drops. Get those gains. Cool. Those are two very wildly interesting points. Thanks for coming prepared with those. Cool. Well, we just have a couple more things to talk about and then we're good to go. But as far as we have talked a little bit of a lot about depression, how that looks today. Talking about the good things, just to reinforce those, is it is good. Depression is good. It forces you to be patient and forces you to take a time out to reflect, to, if you're in a team setting or family setting, group setting, to come together and counsel. What is going on here? Why isn't this working? The other good part of it is makes you strong. I have written down here mental fortitude. Yeah, man, when something doesn't happen and you're a little blue about it, and then you come back and then you get socked in the face again and you just keep doing it and then it works, your mind is like, okay, bring it on. You develop that fortitude. Depression, it helps you recharge the batteries. We mentioned that. And it helps you push through a lot of things and bounce back. Those are all insanely good things. I'd never really thought about depression being such a great thing. And then as far as on the bad side of things, you know, if you're depressed, a lot of people that have depression, they will, you know, stay in their bed for a long time or not want to move. They'll stay linear. They won't be active. I think the worst of all is obviously giving up. You know, you do fail and you're like, why is this so horrible? And a lot of people don't bounce back and they'll say, well, it's so horrible because I'm horrible, you know, and I'd be better off without me. And then that's where people start taking their lives. And that is the worst side of depression, in my opinion. A lot of the other bad sides are isolation. People will start to isolate themselves and not be social. And, you know, and maybe that's a cry for help as well, as going away. And people are like, well, where did that person go? And it's to send that message like, hey, things aren't right. Another bad thing is negative self-talk. I kind of just mentioned it, but like, yeah, like I'm no good, or it'd be better off without me. I'm horrible. I suck. I can't do this. I keep failing at this. I'm not meant to do it. You know, man, you can do a lot more than you think you can if you just stick with it. I'm a firm believer in that. Like, I'm surprised I made it this far in my life. You can get pretty far with not a lot. And then the other thing, for some reason with the depression, you know, comfort foods, right? There's a lot of unhealthy eating habits that come from depression or lack of purpose, and in both ways. So yeah, the most stark of those is obesity, but think of the other side of it, anorexia and the depression there. And I'm sure, you know, the folks that have had experiences with anorexia or bulimia, which is a really hard issue. You know, there's a lot of depression going on there, or that's kind of the root of maybe why they're having those feelings. And then, yeah, we mentioned that as well, as just not feeling like you have any purpose in life. And maybe you don't, and then you take that to unhealthy eating habits, or, you know, being lackadaisical, or having that negative self-talk. So, man, why we got to end the podcast on something on that note?
We can sing. We can sing and dance.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have anything to add before our last calls on those thoughts?
No, I mean, I think you and I are good people to talk about this. Like, and that's a funny thing. Once we kind of got into adulthood and realized, like, we're just, you know, humans. We're just humans, lucky to be here, kind of deal. And wow, it's weird. The human experience is weird. I have no fear talking about my idiosyncrasies and my fears and my anxiety as a kid and some anxieties today. And Cole and I, that was something that we experienced together. Like, I hadn't really opened up about how anxious I'd been most of my life. And when I say most of my life, it was definitely context dependent as I aged. Like, once puberty hit, I got lucky and I outgrew most of anxiety. With sports, I was still pretty anxious and some other things, but not really. But sports was my whole life, and so I was pretty anxious. But yeah, so I got to talk to Cole about that, and he opened up about his own history with mental health, and to find somebody, a friend, that is confident in who they are enough to talk about their own weaknesses and frailties is really lucky. Like, that is really cool. And that was, you know, and that's probably healing for a lot of dudes, to run into somebody and you know, and they just somehow spontaneously start sharing, like, oh no, man, I'm kind of messed up, and this is kind of my story. And it's like, hey, I'm sorry that happened to you. That makes sense why you'd be a little messed up. Like, I'm here for you. And that might change their whole life, you know?
Yeah.
And that might change their whole life. And so I'm lucky that Cole and I were able to kind of connect on our own hyperactive brains, and that I was able to dunk on him so much in college. Just kidding. Yeah. I don't think I ever dunked on Cole. He's a big guy.
Yeah, I think that's a good thought. And feelings are mutual for sure. Well, before we sign off, let's do a last call. I had a thought way earlier when we were talking about anxiety, where I was like, "Oh, don't bring this up right now. Things are going well," and that's what the last call is for. You were talking about mule deer and how anxious they are, and I just wanted to say, that's what makes them better than everything else in the big game world. I'm serious. I love mule deer, and I've been staring at that mount behind you and just the memories behind that. That's from Colorado, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cole helped me drag this one out.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, one of my most favorite qualities about them is how challenging they are. I do love the taste of them, far better than, I think most game. I like it all, but they're so challenging. They're so antsy. They don't, with elk, you spook an elk, they'll look back, and a lot of times these deer, sometimes they do, but they're just out, Audi 5000, they're gone, dude. They're not coming back. And sensitive ears. They've got these, they call them mule deer. They got the big ears. They can hear well, they smell like, dude, they're tough. Even the Forkies could be tough sometimes. And let alone a big, big mature buck. So that's my last call. I was just saying, freaking love mule deer, man. And it's February, and I'm like, I need it to be November or October already.
Yeah. So we got a lot of good stuff to look forward to. And maybe we'll do a podcast from the hills of some of the foothills of some deer hunt that we are going to do. Because we do have one planned already, and I'm sure we got more in the works.
Yeah. We'll have many. All right, dude. Your last call. Any thoughts?
Oh, I mean, I hate to go back into the podcast too much of the content of it, but I did have one thought while you're talking about where depression can go awry that I did want to bring up, because I know a couple people might have thought, how would depression be adaptive or useful if you just sit there forever? Because people today sit there forever. They'll just hibernate in their room forever and waste away or balloon. But that's the thing is, today we can. Our friend or our family or DoorDash can bring us food, and we can just sit there and we can ruminate and we can be sad. But in the ancient world, the one observation I wanted to make was there was hunger and there was a need to eat. And I'm just wondering how much hunger or fasting could be useful and this is purely just a thought that's come to me right now, but that probably was what got people to end that period of withdrawal and rumination, is like, but I do have to eat, so I'm going to go out there. And in our world, we don't really have that hunger cue or signal or urge to get us up and out of that ruminating period when we're depressed. So maybe we can look into this a little bit more and see if it's a legitimate hypothesis that doing some, fasting in a depressed state might help you get through that rumination period and get on your feet. Yeah, sounds like a great topic on this part 2 of this is for the solutions. We should do some homework on that, which is a plug for if you found this to be useful, or if you didn't, tune in for the next one. We're excited to continue this conversation on part 2. So episode 6, this has been episode 5. Do you have anything else, Casey, before we sign off? Good to go? That's it. Thank you, sir. Cool. I did want to say, so as we continue to crank out quality content for free, I mean, we're doing this on our own time and our own time and dime. All that we ask is that you could like, subscribe, and start some alerts. I know that you hear that a lot. It really helps us reach more people, and it helps us get a better position within algorithms on social media. So we'd really appreciate that. Also, if you're tuning into this podcast on Spotify, do us a favor and rate us.
with the furthest right star. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 would be the furthest right. We'd appreciate that too. And until next time, thank you for tuning in, and we appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks, man. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, you bet.